So, today we're going to be starting with our CSS, which is the second language that we need to know about. Out of the three, we've treated part of the HTML, not everything, but we've talked about the major elements that you are going to be used, that we'll be using day in, day out there. So we talked about all these basic elements. The other one that we need, I'm going to be looking them out later on when the time comes for them to be used. But the major one you need is what we've talked about. So now we need to introduce the CSS because our element right now, they look ugly and they're not look like the way we want them to be. And as you can see on the page, we have this title, we have this text, but we should be able to style them, add some little ginger or the to look more attractive to the user there. Look at all this button here. I don't want them to be like this. I want it to look nice to whoever is going to be seeing this page. So I want my background here to have a particular color or image and so forth like that. So we need CSS in order for us to be able to do everything that I just talked about now. And in order for you to be able to do that, we need to be able to include CSS on our page. So today, I'll be talking about how you can include CSS by using any of these methods here. And apart from that, we're going to be talking about what is rule set. And again, we're going to be talking about CSS selectors. This is not, we can't talk about all of them today, but for this class, we should be able to treat this our basic selector, and at the same time, if we have time there, we should be able to get to this child selector. But I normally put this one for another class because there's a lot of things that is going on there. But today, we're going to see how to include CSS on the page, how to select the element as where the selector comes in, and in the other class there, we're going to be talking about other things like the color representation. But before we go to color representation, we're going to be talking about the CSS units because you need these units when you are dealing with measurement, because there's some element on the page that depend on measurement, and when you are doing the measuring, then you need to put the units that you're using for the value, and based on the unit, the browser knows how to calculate the necessary stuff that it needs to do on the page. But for today, we're going to be dealing with this intro and the selector. And by today, you know what is type selector, class selector, ID selector, attribute, and issuer selector. Once you are done with today's class, if there is time, might get it, but this one is not certain. But we're going to treat everything under this basic selector there. And last time, when we are dealing with linking, I talked about we talked about different ways of linking your files together. We talked about this absolute or external linking, and at the same time, we talked about internal or relative linking. And under our relative, we really talk about the same folder linking. Because right now, on this page on line 28, I'm using another type of relative linking here, which is known as a child folder linking. Because when you're dealing with linking under the relative, so let me H3 or H2, we have this relative linking, because it's necessary that I talk about this, because when you want to link to external CSS, you still be using the linking that you use for your image or for the page. So they are all the same. How you are using them is what is different, but the linking is always the same. They follow the same pattern there. And we talked about our absolutes. So absolutes or external linking there. So let me just put this in under linking instead of saying relative like this. So apart from this one, we talked about the relative or internal linking. But under this one, we have this same folder linking. You know this one already. When the file that you want to link together are inside the same folder, just call the name and the extension of the file. But it's not always possible that whatever files you want to work with will be in the same folder. Some of them have to be in a separate folder, but the arrangement matters. So if you look at it here now, under this intro selector here, I have this folder images, and inside this intro selector again, I have this index.html and I have style.css. And under these images, as you can see, I have this one file there, which is this rule set png that I want to use inside this index.html. But if you look at the two of them, they are not inside the same folder. So they are not inside the same folder. This index is inside intro selector, while this rule set is inside images, and the images too is inside intro selector. So, and we need to connect them together. How do you do it? You don't just mention the name of the file. That is something you need to do first before you mention the file. And when you want to do something like this, when you have this kind of arrangement, when you want to connect them together, the type of the linking that you're going to be using under this internal is known as a child folder. So child folder. And lastly, the other one that is there is going to be this parent folder. These are the different methods that you can use to link your file together when you are dealing with relative or internal linking there. For external, you don't need to do anything. Get the link and you use it wherever you want to use that link. But when you're dealing with this internal relative, you need to know how your files are structured, how your folders and files are structured. Then based on the structure, we determine whether you have to go with the same folder, the child folder, or the parent folder. And when are you going to go with the same folder? The time you go with the same folder is when the two files that you want to connect together are inside the same parent. So this index.html and this style.css now, both of them, if you look at the icon, they are aligned. The name too is aligned. So which means the two of them are coming from the same parent, which is this intro selector. But if you look at this rule set.png and this index.html, first of all, the icon is not aligned, and at the same time, the name too is not aligned. So if you look at it now, this rule set is shifted inside. So which means it is inside this images folder. So how are you now going to know, because now that they are not inside the same folder, the only thing you are left with is this child or this parent folder. So when are you going to pick the child, or when are you going to pick the parent? The time you'll be picking these two is when the two files are not together. But the way the files are arranged will determine whether you have to go with the child one or you are going to go with the parent linking them. And now you're going to know about these things. So let me open it in my file explorer so that you can see it better, and I will now explain it how it looks like in VS Code there. So refill in file explorer. So once you open this folder or any folder you are working with, if you look at it now, inside the folder we have images, we have style, and we have this index.html. So, and you know that from this index.html, we want to connect to something that is inside image. So how do you see what is inside the image? You need to open it. You need to enter that folder before you can see the file that is inside it. So when you need to do something like this, so you have a file here and there is another folder beside it that you need to enter to see what is inside it. What you are going to be using there is known as this child folder. Anytime you want to connect from one file to another one, if the file where you want to connect on, so this index now, this is where we want to use the image, but the image you want to use is inside this folder. So before you can see anything inside this folder, what do you have to do? You have to enter the folder by double clicking on it there, and you'll be able to see what is inside it so that you can preview or do anything you want to do with it like that. But from the code, you cannot double click on your code to open folder. So how do you do it? So to do the same thing that we just did now, like double click on the folder to open it to see what is inside it, you are going to be using this child folder linking. And what does that mean? What it means is that anytime you want to link to a file, but that file is inside another folder and you need to enter before you see it, you have to mention the name of the folder first
before mentioning the file. So when you want to enter the folder, before you can, like, you have to enter the folder before you can see the file, you have to mention the name of that folder first, then followed by slash. This slash is telling the browser that this thing is a folder. So inside it, you need to enter before you can see this particular file. It doesn't care about this. Once it sees slash at the end, it will treat it as folder. So that's how it works. So if you don't put slash here, it's seeing them as just one file. You just see it as the name of the file. But once there is slash there, then as you can see now, VS Code will see the file that's inside it, and you can quickly click on the stop, because you can have multiple files inside that folder there. So if when you want to link to any file, you need to check first whether it is relative or external. So if you are getting it from external source, you know that that's the external. But if you already have them already in your project folder, what do? You need to check again what type of relative are you to use. So if the two files that you want to connect together, their name in VS Code is aligned, just know that you have to use same folder linking. But if the name is not aligned at all, so if you expand these images, as you can see, the R and this I now, they are not on the same line. So which means you can't use the same folder to link them together. So the next thing is to check, is it child folder or is it parent folder? So how are you going to know that it is child folder that you need to use? From your file here, forget about the VS Code for now. I will show you how to do it from VS Code. So check the files. This is our file now. This is index. But we want to access something that is inside image. How do you get the file that's inside image? You need to what? Enter. So since you need to enter the folder, then in your code, what you have to use is this child folder linking. And what is that child folder? Child folder, just like you have to enter that folder first before you mention the file that you want to connect to. And since our folder here, where the file is images. So that's the reason why I'm using images here, then followed by slash, which talk to the browser that, oh, this thing is a folder. You have to enter it before you see file. So, and if you have, maybe the folder you have is like is nested inside each other, like 3 or 4, then you keep mentioning the name of the folder until you get to the last one that has the file that you are looking for. For example, here now, assuming inside the images like this, there's another folder there. So you have to mention that folder too. So folder 2 slash, if there's another folder again, folder 3 slash, and you keep doing it like that until you get to the one that have the file you are looking for. But here now you can see it's only one that we have images, and directly we have the file inside it. But assuming this your folder now is having another folder inside it, and that's where the file is located, and you have to mention that folder first. For example, here this is going to be common like this. So for you to access anything that is inside this folder, common here, as you can see, that one too is inside images. So what you have to do here is to use let me leave this one and move another one. So what you have to do here is to mention the folder, which is going to be these images, and as you can see now, we have access to common like that. Then from there, you now have access to everything that is inside that folder. It's not showing anything right now because I did not have any file inside it. But assuming I have a file inside it, for example here, I just have a test.png, even though this is not a valid image because I just created the stuff, so it will not show. But now I have access to it. But before you can get to this test.png, you have to pass through the image, follow the common, then you now have access to test.png. And what you are using here is what is known as a child folder. Because why? Because you have to enter the folder first before you can see the file. So when you need to enter the folder before you can see the file, you have to use the child folder linking there like that. So for this parent one, I'm going to bring it out later on because this is the only one we need right now, the child folder. The sample for this one, I'm going to bring in later on when we want to use it too like that. But for now, I'm talking about the child folder. And when are you going to use child folder? If you look at this index, it's inside this intro selector. The images that I want to use is inside this the image that I want to use inside these images are like this. So in order for us to be able to get to this rule set PNG, we need to pass through this folder. And the same thing too on inside your file explorer. You can't just have access to anything that's inside a folder without you opening that folder. So from here now, there's no way you can see what is inside this folder until you open it. So how do you open it from your file explorer? You double click on the stuff. But you know in your code, there's no way the user will be able to double click on where this thing is coming from. So how do you talk to the browser that this is where you are going to get the stuff from? So you are going to mention the name of the folder, then followed by the slash. Once there is slash there, whatever that comes before that slash, it will treat it as folder. Then you mention the file. And if that thing did not end with slash, it will treat it as file. Even if it's like this one now, it will treat it as file. Before you can treat this one as folder, it must end with slash. Once it ends with slash, it is folder. Whatever that comes before slash is folder. But if it's not having slash, it will treat it as file. So that's how browser is going to know whether to open the folder or not. So because the browser doesn't know about the file, whether it is file or it's folder. The way it's going to know that this thing is folder is when the text there is ending with slash. So here now, since we are ending slash here, we are having slash here, it will treat this image as folder. So it will enter it and look for whatever you are looking for there. But if you look at this one again, we still have another slash again. So which means from images here, it will enter this common folder. Then from there, it will look for this file known as test. It doesn't care about the extension, but you know you need to put the correct corresponding extension so that this thing can pick correct file inside that your folder there. So this is what we call child folder, which is really useful anytime you put your file in another folder. And when it is another folder, but the main thing that you need to be careful of is that this image too is inside that intro selector. It's not outside of this intro selector. Well, assuming this image now is outside of this intro selector, that's where the parent will come in later on. But for now, you see that this images too is inside the intro selector. The index is inside the intro selector. That's the reason why we're able to use this child. But if this images is not inside this intro selector, we can't use this child again. What we'll be using is parent. But how do you type that one? I'll be showing you later on there like that. I will even bring it out when we are linking our CSS together there. But for now, just know about this child. I will bring this parent 1, 2 later on, because when you want to deal with this, your CSS, this external, as you can see, this external CSS, you should be able to connect to CSS that is inside its own file. But when you want to connect them together, some CSS, they are not in the same folder, while most of them are going to be in the same folder. So if it's inside the same folder, you use the same folder linking. If they are not inside the same folder, then you have to check whether it's the child one or the parent folder linking that you need to use. But most of the time, I will always put the HTML and the CSS together in the same file. But that doesn't mean that's the only way you can do the stuff. You can actually separate the two of them into a different folder and you can link them together. But when you are linking, you need to know which type you are to use when you are dealing with your linking there like that. So this is not for CSS alone. You can use it anywhere you are performing linking there. So, and how do you include CSS on the page? So we have these 3 methods that you can use to include CSS on the page. We have this inline method, we have this embedded method, and we have this external method. These two, they are always inside your HTML file. While this one, you are having a separate CSS file. When you are using these two, you'll be doing everything inside your HTML. But when you are dealing with this one, you have CSS in its own file, then you are now connecting it to your HTML, and that's what we call external CSS. For example, now this one now is external CSS. But for this other two, you are going to be doing it inside your HTML. And how do you do it? How do you do inline CSS? To perform inline CSS, what you just need to do here is to use this attribute on your element. So when you want to work with inline CSS, what you are doing there is that you are giving your element this attribute style. Anytime you want to use inline CSS, what you do is to go to the element and you give it attribute style. This one that you have on this line 8. So this H1 is the element. And the inline CSS you are doing here is this style here. So let me align the stuff, and we're going to type it too, but let me move this one to one side. Yeah, so bring out the box. So here now, this is what we call inline CSS, because you are applying it on that element, on that line. So whatever you are doing here is only for this H1. It will not affect any other element on the page. Even if there is another H1 on the page, it will not touch them, because you are only applying it on that particular element, and that's why we call it inline CSS. And how do you create it? So to create the inline CSS, just go to the element and give it this attribute style. So you have started CSS like this. You can, any CSS you want to do, you can do it there, but it's for that element alone. So here, for example, let me just say color is red. What I just type here now, I will explain it when we get to the rule set are there. That's why the image is here. So that guy. But for now, just know that this is how you create inline CSS. So going back to the page, can you see now the color has changed to red, but other H2 that is on the screen, as you can see, nothing is happening to them, because the styling that we're applying here is just inline to this element alone. And this is the reason why we don't really use it that much, because most of the time the styling you want to apply on this H2 is what you want to apply to the other H2, or you want to do it once to all the elements, not that you want to keep going to each one of them. If you want this one too to have that stuff, what you have to do, mention the inline CSS, then pass whatever the stuff into it, then it will work. But this is bad, because now imagine you have like 10 H2. Are you not going to be going there one by one to change them, or later on something changed? That means you have to look for anywhere you're doing the stuff to change the value. We don't want red again, we want to change it to blue. This one is kind of as simple, because it's just two places, so I can quickly change it to blue, and this one too, I will change it to blue and it will work. But this is bad, because you are going to be having a lot of elements that are having the same style. Are you not going to be going to each one of them to apply the style? And again, to look at what I just did, I only do one stuff on it. Now imagine I'm doing like 10, 20, because you are going to be doing a lot of stuff on your element there, and you want that thing to be applicable to all of the elements that follow the pattern that you are looking for on the page. And that's the reason why you will be seeing me using this inline, because it is not good when you are dealing with a large project there, because you are dealing with a project that is big, and you're not going to be going to each element to be styling them. No, I should be able to style them at once, and that's where we'll be talking about embedded and the external CSS, because the two allow you to style your element at once without you going to them one by one to apply the style. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't know about inline CSS. You can use it, it will work if you use it. And if you don't use it, you can go with this other two that we have there. But for inline, to have inline CSS, just give your element this attribute. And inside this code, you start applying the CSS property. What is this property? Later on, when we're talking about the color property, I will bring it in there. But if you look at this thing, there's a pattern that is here. You have a text here, followed by column, then followed by another text. What is that? That thing there is what we call declaration. So that thing that you are seeing there is what we call declaration. So what is declaration? This is whatever you want the CSS to apply for you on that element. But what are you trying to apply? That's what we call property. But what is the value for that thing is what we call the value. And it always follows this pattern here, because we are going to be using this thing a lot. There's no way you want to deal with CSS and you're not going to deal with this property and value. So whatever you have before the quote or before the column here is what we call the property name, and whatever you have after the column is what we call the property value. The value are you trying to give to the stuff? You can see the property is color, but I can give it different value. I can say that this color is going to be blue, or it's going to be yellow, or it's going to be green. This one here, this red here, is what we call the value. The color here is what we call the property, and you separate them through this column. And at the end of each one of them, you should only have this semicolon. Right now, it is just one of them. That's why I did not put semicolon, or this thing will remove it. But when you have multiple property that you are applying on this element, you are going to separate each one of them. Please look at it. You are going to separate each one of them with this semicolon here. So This is the color, the first one. So I want to have another property. For example, this is another property here, which I can use to change the text size. Just forget about all this one for now. The pattern is what you should focus on, because we are going to talk about them when we get to the property side. But the only thing I'm after here is the arrangement, not what they are doing. So when you have property, or when you are applying declaration, so here now, this is one declaration. This element have two declarations. So this element has two declaration. The first one is this color with the value of red. The second one is this font size with the value of 56 px. There. What is that px? You are going to know about them when we are talking about the units. That's where we are going to talk about everything. What is that px? So under the unit, you know about it. Under the color representation, there you know about all these different ways of representing colors like that. So, but what we have here is what we call declaration. And inside declaration, you have property and you have value. So this is the property name and this is the value of the property. And when you are giving multiple declaration to your style or to your element there, you are going to separate each one of them with this semicolon here. So when you are done with the first property, or when you are done with the first declaration, you want to do another one. What do? You give it a semicolon. Then you are going to see this improperly when we are dealing with this embedded or external CSS. But it's still the same thing, whether you are dealing with external or you are dealing with inline or you are dealing with embedded. You always apply CSS there. And when you are applying your CSS, this is the pattern that it follows. You have the declaration. For the declaration, you are going to have the property name, you are going to have the property value. And when you need to have another one, the first one that you are done with there, you put semicolon so that you can type another one. When you are done with this second one too, if you need to have the third one, you put semicolon at the end of this one too. Because that's how CSS is going to know that you are done with one, you want to give it another declaration. And what is happening here now, on that element, that particular element, the text is going to be 56 and the color is going to be red. So let me save so that we can have this in. Can you see? So now it's even bigger than H1 because you can control your element from CSS anyhow you want. So the color is red and at the same time the font is 56px here. But this thing is not happening to the second H2. It's not happening at all. It's only for that first one, and that's the disadvantage of inline. So you have to talk to each one of the elements one by one. You can't talk to all of them at once, or you can't just say, oh, I only need the first and the second one, I only need the last two. You can't do all those things. You have to go inside each one of them to apply your CSS. But instead of you doing it like this, what we can do is to use this embedded or external, because these two allows you to apply CSS to your element or apply CSS to different elements at the same time. So the only thing you just need to do is to select the element you want and apply whatever you want to do. And that's where this selector comes in. That's where this name is coming from, this selector here. Because that's what we're using to select the element. So the element you're now selecting there, it will apply whatever you want to apply on that element there. So to include CSS using the inline, just go to the element you want and use this style attribute. But instead of you doing this, we can use the embedded CSS. And how do you use embedded CSS? By convention, we normally place embedded CSS inside the edge. By convention, we normally place the embedded CSS inside the edge tag, but you can place it anywhere on the page. But by convention, we normally place it inside the edge. And how do you create embedded CSS? To create embedded CSS is just by using this style as element. So instead of using style as attribute, what you do is to use it as element. So look at it now. As you can see, I'm calling it like normal element. But when it is inline, it's going to be attribute to your element. But when it is inline, it will be attribute. And if it is embedded, then it's going to be element. So this is what we call embedded CSS here. Because it's standing on its own. It's not related to any element added. So But how are you not going to talk to this one that, oh, we want you to style this H1 or we want you to style this P, because now it's not belonging to any element again. So since it's not belonging to any element, how are you going to target the element on the page? And that's where rule set comes in. So this is where we have CSS rule set. So this is where we have CSS rule set. And what is rule set? Rule set is a combination of selector and the declaration you want to apply on the element. You know, on the inline, when you're dealing with inline, the only thing you just pass is declaration. You don't need to tell it where to apply the style because you're already on this H2. And since you're applying this inline style, it knows that you're supposed to apply it on the H2. You don't need to talk to it where to apply the style. But when you are using this embedded or external, all this one doesn't know about the elements that you want to style. So you need to talk to them that this is the element you want to style and this is the style that you want to apply on the element. So how do you talk to the CSS that this is the element you want to style? That's what we call this selector. This is what we are going to use to talk to CSS. Go to this element or find this element. So if you can find that element, then these are the properties that I want you to change on it. And everything combined together is what we call rule set. So rule set is in this pattern here. You are going to have your selector, where we are going to be talking about them later on. We'll talk about different selector. So after selector, you have this curly brace like this. And inside the curly brace, you are going to have all the declarations. Declaration is just the properties that you want to change on the element there. So this is how you'll be doing your declare or the rule set there. So you are going to have this your embedded style, which is this CSS. Then inside it, you are going to be having the rule set. So this is one rule set. In case you need to have another rule set again, then you go to another line and you construct that rule set again. And this is what you always do in CSS. You'll be creating rule set for CSS there. And what is the rule set? Rule set is the combination of selector and the declaration. The selector is what you use to talk to CSS that locate this element. And when that element is found, then apply everything that you have inside curly brace. Whatever you want to change on the element, they are going to be in the curly brace. But how do you get to the element? You are going to be using selector. And you are going to be doing it like this. Depending on the number of elements you want to target, like that. So declaration like this. So this is how you always do it. But what is declaration to? Declaration is just this property followed by colon, then followed by value, and followed by this semicolon. This is a pattern you always follow. So this one now is going to be property 2 like this, and it's going to be value 2. Property 3, this is going to be value 3. It's not important that you put the space here. You can. This is how you always see me using it, but you can put the space in between them. So your declaration is this. So this is one declaration, this is another declaration, and this is another declaration. But everything must be inside the curly brace. And before the curly brace, you are going to have the selector, which is what you use to change the styling or to locate the element that you want to apply the styling in. This is a property or this is a pattern that you always follow anytime you are dealing with CSS. For example, here now, we want to select H1 on our screen. So what do? We can just bring out this our style, H1 like this, then color is this red. So what we are doing here, so this one here, so this is your embedded CSS. This one here is your selector, and everything here is what we call the declaration. So this style, this is your embedded CSS. Let me type everything out so that I can show on the video. So here it is known as this embedded CSS. That's how you create it. So for this H1 that is here, it is known as selector. Because what you are doing here is that you are selecting all the H1 on the screen. That's what that thing means. We are talking to CSS that go to the page inside the body, look for anywhere that is H1, and if you can find it, then change the color to red, which is now your declaration. So declaration is whatever properties that you want to apply, and this thing is split into two parts. So it's split into two parts. The color here is what we call the property. So we call property name, And that red, the red here, is what is called the property value. So what is the value you want to give here? That's the red. What is the name of the property? This is the color. And we have a lot of properties that you can change on the elements that you are working on at a particular time are there. But which element? This is where you are going to be specifying the element. But we have different ways of targeting the element. Right now, I'm using one type, which I'm going to talk about it when we get to the selector part. But for now, this is the pattern that you always work with there when you are dealing with embedded CSS. With your embedded CSS, you are going to create this style element which have this opening and the closing tag. Inside it, you are going to create the declaration. Your declaration here is going to have selector, and you are going to create your rule set. Then inside the rule set, we have the selector, which is this H1. What are you using to select the element? And inside the curly brace, you have the declaration. What are the properties that you want to change on the elements are there like that. So we have the embedded CSS, which is this style here. Inside it, you are going to have different rule sets. So here we have only one rule set. We have only one rule set. Inside it, we have only one rule set. So this is our rule set here. So this is just our rule set. Everything here is a rule set. But this rule set too is inside our embedded CSS. And you can have multiple rule sets inside your embedded CSS there. So here now, if I want to have another rule set, what I just need to do, go to another line after that curly brace, and we can specify whatever we want. So this is another rule set. But the rule set is having its own selector, and it's having the property that I want to apply or names there. For example, here I have 45 pixels, and at the same time, this is another which is going to be this green like this. So this is a rule set. The rule set is having this selector and it's having all this declaration. And what CSS will do here is that it will look for where you have this your element that matches this stuff here. Is going to apply all this style on it. Element that matches all this style here. Element that matches this selector here is going to apply whatever style that you put there. And now going back to the page now, you see that on the page, can you see all our H1 will be red and all the H2 can you see all of them? All the H2 is going to have that style. This one is H1. That's why it is the color is red. But this one is H2. No, I did not say I will name the first one, or they said it's applying it to all of them at once. And in case I need to make any changes, this is the only place I will just do it. So I don't need this one again. I need purple as a background. If you go back to the page now, you see that everything will change once the stuff is downloading. So you don't need to start going to each one of the elements to change the stuff one by one like that. So embedded and the external make it easier for us to target multiple elements at the same time without you going to them one by one. But inline, you have to go to the element one by one, give them the attribute style, and you apply whatever you want there. But with embedded or external, what you always do there is your rule set. And what is rule set? Is the combination of selector and the declaration, which are the properties you want to change. But look at the pattern. You see that I'm putting them on a separate line. It's not a must that you put them on a separate line, but for reading sake, each declaration are going to be on their own line. To the browser, it can read this thing, but to you that is creating the stuff, you are going to be having more than this later on. So you can't just be putting them on one line. It will not be easier to read. So you always put them on a separate line. Yes. Yes. All of them is inside this. Yeah. Can see that's why we have the opening tag and the closing tag. So that's your embedded. So everything has to be inside it. So everything has to be inside it. But you are going to be having a different declaration. So this is one declaration and this is another declaration. As when I want to have another one too, I just need to press enter after this curly brace and you create another one again. And that's what you'll be doing in CSS. You always create declaration and you apply, or you only create the rule set rather. So you create your rule set. So let me bring out this thing out here. So this line here, is our embedded CSS. While this one is your rule set. So these are rule set here. So we have this one is embedded. No, let me increase this thing. So this is the embedded CSS. Why these two are your rule sets. But inside the rule set too, you are going to be having declaration. So this is one declaration. So you have the declaration here, or let's just say everything is declarations. So, and again inside the rule set, you are going to be having selector. This H2 now is what we call selector. So like that. You can have multiple selector too on that line, but for now, we're only using one. But when we started talking about selector, you see different types or different ways of using selector there like that. And when we are done with selector, then we now move into declaration. Like all the property, what is color doing, what is font size doing, what is background doing, how do you change the text from lowercase to uppercase, or how do you make sure the text is on the left or it's on the right or it's on the center. But first, we need to treat this selector, because if your selector is not right, then everything is wrong. Selector is the first thing that CSS will check. It will check this your selector. Is it matching anything on the page? If it is matching, then it will apply whatever property you want to apply. But assuming this thing is not matching anything on the screen, then nothing will happen. Even though you've typed all these things now they are useless to this page. They are okay, but they are useless to this page. Why? Because this selector will not match anything on the screen. I don't have any H6 on the screen. So save this one now. Go back to the page. You see that nothing is happening. And I think I have there's one H6 here. So let me check. I think I have one H6 on the page. Let me scroll down. That's why you see that the styling is there. So it means there is one H6 somewhere. Yeah, it's there because I put H1 to X6 down here. Can you see? There is one H6 there. But assuming this one is not there, so comment it out and go back to the page. You see that nothing is happening again. So your selector is very important, and that's the reason why we want to treat it first. Because if you know about the property and you don't know how to select, everything that you are doing here is useless. The first thing CSS will check is this your selector. It will check it, does it match anything on the page? So if it match element on the page, then it will go to that element and it will now apply everything that you put in. But if it's not matching anything, then it will just keep all the declaration that you have in. It will not do anything because the element that you want to apply it to is not there. Like you bought something from Jumia and you mention your address there, but it not meet you at home. There's no way they will drop the product. They will have to return it back. So, and that's what this one too will do. It will check, does this thing, is it available on the page? No. Can I see it on the page? No. Is this your selector matching anything on the page? No. Then all these one are useless. Everything inside the curly brace are useless if your selector is not matching anything. So this is a embedded CSS. So we've talked about the inline CSS and we've talked about the embedded CSS. To create the embedded CSS, just go to the edge. I told you can put it anywhere. If I want, I can put it inside the body. But by convention, we normally put it inside the edge tag. If you put it inside the body or anywhere on the page, inside this body here, it will still work. But you should always place it at the top so that the browser will load all the CSS before rendering the contents on the page. So to deal with your embedded CSS, just call your style. So style like this, then press enter to create the stuff for you, and inside it you start creating your rule set. So this is how you work with embedded CSS. But how do we deal with external CSS? And what is the advantage of external one? So look at this one now. The CSS we are doing here now is only for this index.html. Now imagine, look at this inside this our folder here. You know that we have a lot of file there, a lot of HTML page. And imagine that all of them they are using the same style. So what we have to do is that the style you have inside about.html, you copy it into this your grouping.html. So when you want to use it again, you copy it inside index. No, that's bad practice. Because now, if you want to change something now, you have to keep going inside each one of the files to make the changes. But instead of you doing that, you can create a file for your CSS only. Like everything that we did is all about CSS. Then whatever you want, anywhere you want to use that CSS, you just connect it to the file, which is the HTML. So instead of us putting the CSS inside our HTML file, we can have a separate file or a dedicated file for CSS only. And anywhere we want to use any of the CSS, we now connect the file to the HTML page, and that's what we call the external CSS. So, and how do you create external CSS? Just create the file, but the file needs to end with .css. The extension have to be .css there like that. Always make sure that your CSS is ending with .css. And what are you now going to be doing inside that file? What you'll be doing is just your rule sets. So whatever you'll be doing here is just rule sets. Everything you'll be doing here is just rule sets. You don't need to start saying style again. This knows that you are dealing with CSS already. So you don't need to start using any style. So here, just apply your rule set, and you know the rule set is going to be the combination of selector and declarations like this. So this is how to work with external CSS there. And here, for example, the same thing that we did before. I have each one. The color is blue like this. The font size is going to be 35px like this. So the same rule set that you are doing inside that your embedded CSS is what you'll be doing here. So if I have another one, for example, I have form. I want the background color to be blue like this. So which means this thing is going to focus on form. This one is going to focus on H1. No, it's going to, because your selector is what determines the element that is going to apply it. These are the properties you want to apply. But where I want to apply it on this H1. And this H1 is what we call selector, because you can do this thing in different way. I can target this H1 in different way. That's why we need to talk about different selector that we have. So this one too, I want to change background color to blue. But what are you changing background color to blue? Where are you changing the background color to blue? It is the form that I want to change its background color to blue. But now if you save it, nothing will happen on the page. As you can see, nothing is happening because we are doing it in external CSS. And this CSS doesn't know about this HTML. HTML too doesn't know about this CSS. So you have to connect them together. And how do you connect them together? You'll be doing it too inside the edge. So inside that head, what you do is to use this another tag here, which is known as this link. So this link is what you use to connect different CSS and the HTML together. So you can use this link to connect your HTML to your CSS or CSS to your HTML, anyhow you want to call it. So link is a tag that you're going to call inside the head. So once you call the link inside the head, then you need to talk about the relation. But most of the time in VS Code, you don't need to stress yourself. Just type link. As you can see, it will complete it for you. But because this link can be used for something else, it's not just for CSS only. So that's why this rel is there. And this rel is just relationship, as you can see. What is the relationship between this link and the whatever file that you are connecting to? So what is it going to do? This link that you are connecting here now, what is it going to do on the page? So we are talking to the page that, okay, everything that is coming from this file is just CSS stuff. And what is this style sheet? It's just the full meaning of this CSS that you are seeing here. That's it. So the full meaning is this. So cascade style sheet. And that is why you see that that name is coming from there. So we have this style sheet like this. So CSS, the full meaning of CSS is just cascade style sheet. So the C is this, the S is this, and the other S is this. So combine them together, that's why you now have CSS. So you are talking to this link that you are loading style sheet. And what is style sheet? It's just CSS. It's not only CSS you can use this link for. You can use it for something else later on, which is what you are seeing on this page. You can see all the sites. See that it's showing their icon. But our own is just showing something else. Like, but how do they put their own icon here? They are using that link to do the stuff. So it's link that is putting this icon here. So it's what the browser. So the browser, you can talk to it that you want this thing to load the icon for you. So it's not just for CSS only. And that's the reason why we have this rel. So when you're dealing with CSS, the rel is going to be style sheet. And this link, what we normally use it for is CSS, but it's not just for CSS alone. And that's why you see that VS Code is using that style sheet by default. Anytime you generate link, it's always default to CSS. But that doesn't mean that's the only thing you can do. As you can see, you can use it for this other type. This is what I'm talking about, this icon that is showing by the side. So you can use the link to load it, or you can use it to even do some other things. But the basic one is the CSS. So once you press enter, you can see it will generate the stuff for you, but it's not left for you to point to it where the link of the CSS are there. But if you notice, here I'm using style.css. Why? Because they are inside the same folder. Look at the index and look at the style. You see that the name is starting on the same line. So since they are starting on the same line, we know that they are of the same folder. And saving this in and going back to the page, now they know about each other. So since CSS already know, I mean the HTML already know about that file, it will go there, copy everything that you have there into that HTML, and it will load everything for you. The browser knows how to load everything automatically, and it will start applying everything. What I don't did here now, this CSS now, I can use it for another file. I don't need to start creating another one. So here we can just quickly create another file, maybe like login.html like this. So generate the page content, and on the page just use h1 login page like this. So from this our index, we talk about the linking. So we can connect the two of them together. So here now you can just use my a tag. Then this is going to go to our login.html. So the text there is going to be login page. So for our login page too, I want to be able to go back. So after this one, I want to have another A. So again, this is going to be index.html. I will just go to home page like that. So save. So going back to our page, we have the link that we can use to go to login page. But now our H1 is not having the styling. Why? Because we've not connected to the CSS file. So in order for it to work, what we just need to do, use your link like this. Where is the file that you want to connect to? It's just style.css, since they are inside the same folder. So from there, now go to the page, and as you can see, the same styling. If you go back, you see that that's the same H1 this one is using. If you go back again, if you go back to that page, you see that it's still the same thing. And if I make any changes to this CSS, it will happen to the two of them at once. For example, here, change the color from this blue to red like this. Go back to the page, you see that it's showing red here. And if you go back to the home page too, it's still the same red because they are sharing the same CSS file. But normally, assuming you are using embedded now, if you make any changes from this login and it needs to happen to that index too, then you have to go to that place too and make the changes. And you know, most of the sites you see, their thing is always the same. Even if you go to another page, you see that some elements are still the same on that page. So look at this page now. This is one page here. The header you are seeing here, if you go to another page, the same thing is still going to be showing there. So why do we need to be creating CSS? Why can't just have it in one place and just connect it to the page where it is needed? So now when I click on this status, it's another page, but everything is still displaying like the same, like the styling. For the heading, the style of the text is still the same. The style of the button is still the same. So you can, right? The button you see here is what you are going to see on the other pages too, whether that button is using the same or not. So if I click on the buttons, you can see still the same thing that is going on. The color is not changing. Then how can you do this? Just create one CSS file and put whatever you want to have inside the stuff here. Like everything is using advanced stuff here, but it's still the same basic stuff it's going on behind the scene there like that. So your CSS, you can have one CSS file and you connect it to different pages instead of you putting the CSS directly inside your HTML file. And that's what I always do for every other class that we're going to be working with. I will always create external CSS and I will connect it to the page where it's needed there like that. So to connect CSS to your page, you can use inline, or you can use embedded, or you can use external CSS there. So when you want to use inline, just go to the element, give it the attribute style. For example, like this OL now, if I want it to have inline CSS, just go there and give it this attribute. And inside it, start applying whatever property you want. So if I want the color of everything to be red, so just apply it, and you see that only this OL and everything that's inside it are going to be affected. Anything outside of it, nothing concern them. So it will not affect this one, it will not affect this one. It will only affect this OL and everything that is inside, because that's how it works. So if you apply something on the parent, it will affect the parent and it will affect all its children there like that. But it doesn't affect anything outside of it. So that's how it works. So this is inline. And if you don't want to use inline, it is embedded you want to use, just go to the head, create this style element, and inside it, you start creating your rule set. And what is rule set? Rule set is a combination of your selector and the declaration. And you know, when you're dealing with declaration, you're going to have a property name and you're going to have the value for the property in this pattern. So the property, the colon, the value, then the semicolon, because you are going to be dealing with multiple property. Like most of the time, you only deal with multiple property on one element, which is what we are doing here. On this single element here, we are applying color and we are applying font size on that element there. And this is how this thing works. So it allows you to apply multiple, and if you don't put it, it's error. If you don't put that in, as you can see, it's error. But you must always separate each one of the declaration with semicolon. But that's how CSS will know that you are done with this line, you are dealing with another line. CSS doesn't care about the way you arrange it, like, so it can be like this. The only thing you care about is this semicolon. If that semicolon is not there, that's when you are doing something else, because here you have another column and you've not closed this one, you are now having another column again. So it's not making sense. But once you close, it knows that okay, this one start from here, it end on this red. And again, font size start here and it end on this line. But to you, as a developer, you always move them to a separate line for reading sake, because you are going to have a lot of lines that you'll be typing depending on the styling that you are trying to apply on that element there like that. So external, you always use your rule set. And how do you connect it to the page? To connect it to the page, inside the head, you are going to be using the link tag. And inside the href, you pass the CSS that you want to connect to there like that. Time. All right. So let me quickly talk about this basic selector that we have in CSS, because time has. So let me quickly talk about the basic selector, because when you want to target the element on the page, you are going to be using different selectors. One element can be targeted through different selectors. Right now, I'm using one type of selector, which I've not really talked about. And that type that I'm using is known as the type selector or the tag selector. You are selecting based on the name of the element. So when you are selecting based on the name of the element, we call it type selector. So to use the type selector, what you just do, anywhere you need to mention your selector, just mention the name of the element. And whatever you are doing now is only going to affect this type alone. So here now we're only focusing on H1. Whatever you are doing here, it will only happen on the H1 alone. No other element will have the stuff except H1 on the page. So no other element on your page will have that styling except H1. And if I don't want it to happen to H1, what I can do here is to mention P. So which means here now, whatever you want to do here or whatever you are doing here is only going to apply it on this P element. So say go to the page, can you see now H1 is not like that again, it's not P that is having the stuff. They don't care whether you are doing something wrong or right or it's too big. CSS doesn't care. Whatever you give to it, that's what is going to apply on the page. Now H1 is now kind of bigger than this our P is now fighting with our paragraph, our heading there, which is not normal. But by default, all H1 all these things have this font size by default, and that's why I say it's of this size. Or if I don't want to change the size, I don't care about the size, use the default stuff that is here, but it's only the color I want to change. And as you can see, no difference because it's using 16 by default. But anything you want to change on it, just mention it and it's going to change it for you. But don't forget, it's only going to focus on the type of the element that you mentioned, because here now you are using type selector. So it will only happen on P tag. So it will only happen on P. It will not happen on any other element on the page apart from P. And if I don't want it to happen on P, I only want it to happen on OL. So save it. Can you see now? It will not happen on P again. It will only happen on OL. And this is what we call type selector. So type selector allows you to select element based on their name there. So is it P, is it H1, or is it this in there? You can use your type selector. So we have the type selector like this. So just mention the name. So this is the type selector. So I have H1. I'm selecting. This is the rule set. So H3, this one will only happen on H3, whatever you are doing there. So P, this one will only happen on P. So form and so forth like that. So this is what we call type selector. But apart from this type selector, we have other types too that you can use, which is this class, ID, or this attribute here. So which means you can target your element based on their class, or based on the ID, or based on the attribute that you have there. Don't forget this class and ID, they are attributes too. But CSS actually have a special way of working with them. But for every other attribute, then you'll be using the method that we'll be talking about here. But for class and ID, they have their own special way because it's common to use. So CSS give us a way. But what is ID? ID is just an attribute on your element. For example, now I can give this element this ID. You can think of it like your ID in school. Like you go to school, each student will have their own identification. So here too, I'm talking to this page that this particular element, this is the identification. Anytime I want to look for it, this is the ID for this element there. There is multiple H2, but I want to differentiate this H2 from the other H2. So here now, this one is going to be heading 2. So I'm calling it this ID. But another thing about ID is that it should always be unique on the page. Just like an identification, and there's no way your ID or your plate number will be the same thing as my plate number. It's something that is unique. So ID should always be unique on the page. Since this one is having ID heading 2 now, no other element on the page should have that same ID again. The other one can have heading 3, heading 1, but it must not be heading 2. So ID should always be unique. But if it is class, that one is just like this class now. There are multiple people inside the class. So which means multiple elements can belong to the same class. And one element can have multiple classes. So you can go to different classes. And how do you create class attributes? Just go to the element, give it the class that you want. So this one now is belonging to class open, and at the same time is belonging to class list item. Single element can belong to multiple classes, and one class too can be used on multiple elements. So this our H2 now again is belonging to a class. That doesn't mean because it's having ID doesn't mean it can't have ID too. So this will work. So look at it, H2 here, it has class open, but the same class open too is what we're using on this airline. It is permitted. So one class can be used on multiple elements, and one element can have multiple classes. So class are going to be separated by space. That's why you see that I'm using hyphen here. So it will treat this one as one class, not two. In order for you to treat them as separate class, you must be separated with space. Once you separate your class with space, then they are separate classes there like that. And you can give element class, can give body any element on the screen or on the page or in your code can have class. So this H2 now is going to have class heading 2. But this one, they are not the same thing. No. This one, this is class heading 2. Why this one is ID heading 2? They are not the same. Class, even though the name can be the same, but they are not the same attribute. This is ID, why this one is class. The way you target this one is different from the way you target this one from the CSS. Because we have ways of selecting class and we have the way of selecting ID. But what do? Just give your element class or the ID that you want. But the thing you need to notice there is that ID is always unique, but class is not. Multiple elements can belong to a single class, and one class can be used with multiple elements. So this open now, we're using it on this H2 and we're using it on this one. So what this one means is that by the time we start based on this class, anywhere that is that class is going to apply the same thing on your element there. But how do you style based on class? And I know we talked about how to style based on type. So now we have the class selector, and at the same time we have the ID selector. So how do you select your element based on ID, or how do you select your element based on class? But before you do all this thing, you know that your element must have that class or ID that you are looking for. Because if selector cannot or if CSS cannot find that selector on the page, nothing will happen
to your element. So how do you select based on class? To select based on class, you start with dot, then followed by the name of the class you are looking for. So here now, I'm looking for class close. Here I'm looking for class open. I'm looking for class open. I'm looking for class heading. I'm looking for class heading 1. I'm looking for class heading 2. So to select based on class, you start with dot,
then followed by the name of the class you are looking for.
if you look at it on the page, what are the classes we have? We have open, and we have list item, and we have heading 2. So when you want to target any of these class on the page from your CSS, you start with dot first, then followed by the name of the class you are looking for. So since I'm looking for list item, then I will do it like this. Then inside this your curly brace, you apply whatever CSS you want that element that belongs to the class to have. So now if I give color red and go back to the page, it's only that element that have that class that is going to, this one is coming from inline. Let me remove it. That inline that I used that time. Yeah. So let me remove the stuff. Yeah.
So as you can see now, this is the only one that is having that star.
But what is the advantage of the class? The advantage of the class is that I can reuse
This one now on another element, and they are going to have the same styling.
So assuming the styling that I'm using here, I want it to happen to this one too. What do? You just give that element to that particular class. So list item. Once you save now, you see that the two of them will be using the same class. Pause. Yes, good. So if you go back there now, as you can see,
this one is using it and this one is using it.
And they don't even need to be of the same type. Because if you look at it now, this one is li, while this one is
OL, but they are using the same class.
So this is the advantage of class. So they don't really need to be of the same type.
As long that element, any element is having that particular class, CSS will see it, and once you see it, it will apply whatever property
that you gave to that element there, like that. But
ID, you know, is only for one element. So it's only useful when you are dealing with a specific element and you know that the thing will never change at all.
But most of the time, what you always use or what you be seeing using is class, because a lot of design on the page,
they're always looking the same.
So since they are the same, what I can just do is to give this element same class, and I will start them at once. Not that I will start mentioning them one by one like that if they are not of the same type. So whether they are of the same type or they are not of the same type, CSS doesn't care. As long as that class is there, it will style them. So if I want this style now to apply it on this my link now, if I want it to apply it on my link, just go there, just go to that element and give it the class, and it will work. If any element, just give the element the style that you want. Then let me even go up and apply it on this our link at the top here. So where is the link? Link. Yeah, this is it here. So the class for this thing is going to be list item. So now going back up, you see that the color of the stuff now will be red. So CSS doesn't care about the element type. It only cares about the class that you are looking, that you are styling. So whether it's on A or P or Z or anything, doesn't care. But how do you start based on class? You start with dots, then followed by the name of the class you are looking for. Can you see the sample? So it's telling you that it will look for what this thing is telling you. If you over on it, it will tell you where it is going to apply the stuff. So this one means it's looking for any element. Because you see, it is not mentioned the element. So once you say element, it means any one of them. It can be A, it can be P, it can be O, and so forth like that. But the major thing is looking for is this class list item on that element. Once that element have this particular class, then all this thing it will apply it. So to select based on class, start with dot, then followed by the name of the class. So the same thing too, this heading too. If I just give you this background of blue, color should be yellow like this. Saved, you see that only element that have this particular class is going to be styled. So scroll up, I think it's down. Yeah, it's down somewhere here. Can you see? It's only that element that have that class that is going to style. And as you can see, it did not work on one element there. It did not work on this element that have that ID. Because you know there is one ID. Can you see heading 2? This CSS selector. As you can see that it did not apply it on that CSS selector stuff. Because that one is not class, it is ID. So how do you not target based on ID? So to target based on ID, That one starts with this hash. Instead of dots, you start with a hash symbol, then followed by the ID name. So whatever the name of the ID, just follow it like that. So for example, here now we have this heading 2. So I'm looking for any element that have this particular ID. As you can see, any element that have this ID heading 2 is what is going to start. So for this one now, the background is going to be yellow, while the color is going to be blue, which is reversing what that one is doing there like that. So save. You see that this one too will now have its own style now. What did I do? Save. So can you see now? See that they are different because this one is looking for ID, while this one is looking for class. Once you see dot, that's class, and if you see hash, that is ID. So they are not targeting. They might be targeting the same element, but they are not using the same selector to do it. So ID we use the hash, while the class we use the dot to target the element. And we're going to be using this class a lot later on uh, because of its flexibility there. You can apply it on different elements. They don't need to be of the same type. You can use it anyway. As long as that particular element is having that class, then it will work. This ID is really useful when it's just one. You're really using it one. So why not? But that is one place of using it too, like that. But most of the time, what we are going to be using is that type selector. We're going to be using class selector, and the other one I will be talking about later on there, like that. But now, how do you select other attributes that you have there? Here we've seen how to select class and how to select ID. But now, what if I want to select this element based on this other attribute? Like this your input now. Can you see that this input is having type, is having placeholder? So what if I want to target element that have placeholder, or the one that have type, or the one that have another attribute? So that's where this attribute selector comes in. If you use it with class or ID too, it will work. But that's a waste of time because there is a way of selecting them already. So why do you need to stress yourself? Because if you use this attribute for class and ID too, it will work. So for other attributes, if you want to work with them, this is how you do it. You have the square bracket here. So inside the square bracket, you mention the attributes you are looking for. So if I'm here now, I can do something like this. So you can do it like this. This is one pattern because it comes with different pattern. So this is another pattern here. These are the two patterns that you need. There is still other two patterns that you can use, but these are the two major ones that you need. So it can be like this, or it can be like this. So when you're using this pattern here, what you're saying is that you're looking for that attribute, but you don't care about the value that is inside it. As long as that attribute is here, it's okay for you. But if you care about the value that is inside it too, that's where the second pattern comes in. So for example here now, we have type password on the screen and we have type text on the screen. So what if I care about the type? I don't care about the text that is actually inside it. Whether you are text, or whether your type is text, or it is password, or it is radio, or any other, I don't care. As long as that attribute type is there, target it. So what we can do here is to do type. That's the name of the attribute. Then here the background is going to be red. So if you go back to the page now, can you see it's going to select all of them? Can you see that it's selecting this one too? The button, but this button is not selected. Why? Because it's not having that attribute. It's not having that attribute. So if you go back to the page, you see that this input is having the attribute type. Again, what if I only want to look for the one that have attribute value? So what you just do, go there, then change this one to value like this. So it means you are looking for this particular attribute. You don't care about the value that is inside it. This is the attribute we are looking for. So save it. Can you see now? Other one are not selected again. It is only this one that is selected because that's the only element on this page that have that attribute. So if you go there again, if you are looking for any attribute that have ID, I told you that you can use it for ID too. So just type the name of here you always type the name of the attribute you are looking for. And if you go back there now, so I think we only have one. Can you see? We only have one that have an attribute. But for class too, it will work. So if you want to do it with class, but this is just waste of typing because there is a. So you can see now, these are elements that have class attribute on them. Every other one that are not selected, they don't have a class. But what if you care about the value that is inside it? Not just the attribute alone. You're not just looking for attribute, you care about the value too. So we can now set the stuff like this. So you put whatever value you are looking for. So for example, like this text. What this one means is that
we're looking for any attribute or any element that have this particular attribute, and the value that must be there is text. Looking for any element is having this attribute, and the value inside the attribute is this particular value. So if you save down, go back to the page, you can see it's only these two that are being selected. Can you see that this one is not selected because the value there is different? It is password. So now if I change it to the value that one has now, so if you want, you can give password to save. Like can you see now? It's not the only one because it's not just this attribute is looking for. The value too must match. The value must match what you type here. You can't just do it like this. You can't just do it like this too. As you can see, it's not work. But that's not the value that is there. The value that is there is password, not passive. You must type everything in full. But you can actually talk to it that you don't want to type everything in full and it still match too. But all those ones, we don't need it now. So we don't need to be wasting our time. These are the two major ones that you need when you are talking about the attributes selector. So we have these attributes. So attributes selector like this. And lastly, the other one that we have there for today, is known as universal selector. And this one is useful when you want to select or you want to apply style to every element of the page at once. So this universal selector is useful when you want to apply same style to every element on the page, even though it's not making sense, but it's that way we normally use it. And that universal selector is this asterisk. So in place of any other thing, once you put asterisk here, this is what we call universal selector, because its own job is to select everything you have on the page. It will not leave everything out of, like all of them, including HTML. It's going to select everything that you have on the page. So, and that's why I want to use this property here. Can you see? It will pick everything. It doesn't care about any element you have on the page. Body, the text, it will select all of them. And that's why I'm using this property, so that you can see that it's selected. Because if I use background, everything will just have the same background, so you will not even see what is going on there because it has already applied everything. For example, here if I just do background of blue, you just be seeing blue as like everything will just be blue. So it will not look as if it's doing it on the body, but it's not doing it on the body alone. It's doing it to all of the, like it's applying the stuff on all the elements. And we have where we used to use it that you are going to be seeing later on there. So today we talked about the CSS, how you can include CSS on the page by using your inline or using the embedded or using the external method. And at the same time too, I talked about the child folder linking, which allows you to connect to a nested folder files. So if you look at it now, under the intro, we have this index.html. Under the intro too, I have these images. And from this low index here now, I want to connect to something that is inside these images. Since I need to enter this folder before I can see the file, you need to mention the folder first before you mention the file that you're looking for. And if the file that you need to enter is like 2, 3, 4, you keep mentioning those folders first before you mention the file you are looking for, like that. And that's what we call this child folder. For the parent one, you are going to see that one later on. And at the same time too, we talked about rule set. Rule set is the combination of selector and along with the declaration. And what is declaration? This is the property and the value that you want to change on that element. So I want to change the font size to what? To this particular value there, because the browser has default setting for all, or default value for all this property. But you cannot change it to anything you want based on your requirement or based on the design that you are working on there. But before you can start doing any of this declaration stuff, you need to know about selector, because selector is very important. Without selector, the CSS will not apply your style when you are dealing with external CSS or when you are dealing with embedded CSS like that. So you need to use your rule set, and from there you use your selector, and the selector is what you are going to use to talk to the browser that this is the element, or This is a whatever element that you want to style on the page there. And for today, we're able to talk about this basic selector. Under the basic one, we talked about the type, the class, the ID, the attributes, and this universal selector. So in the next class here, we're going to be talking about this combinatory selector and this pseudo selector. And apart from this pseudo, we're going to be talking about the units. And because if you look at some of the value I'm using here on this page, I'm doing 16 pixels there. What is RPX? So when we get to the unit part, that's what we'll be talking about all those one there like that. So that is going to be all. Was yeah, choose.